The Lady and the Midnight Letter. Chapter 1. The Anonymous Warning. London, 1816. The candle on Lady Margaret Ellsworth's writing desk had burned down to a miserable stub, its wax pooling like a small amber graveyard. Outside, the rain lashed against the townhouse windows in relentless sheets, turning Grosvenor Square into a smudge of black and silver. It was the sort of night that encouraged confessions, secrets, and, as Margaret was about to discover, ruin. She ought to have been asleep. Instead, she sat in her dressing gown, a novel open but unread in her lap, her thoughts adrift on the grey sea of her own loneliness. At 26, Margaret was considered by the ton to be perfectly, immaculately poised. A porcelain figure who hosted dinner parties with surgical precision, who never raised her voice, and who had, 3 years prior, accepted a proposal from the late Lord Ellsworth with the same polite detachment one might show a footman offering a second scone. The Earl had been 58, gout-ridden, and kind in a distant, distracted way. His death had left her wealthy, untethered, and profoundly, secretly lonely. A soft thump against the drawing-room window made her start. She told herself it was only a branch, loosened by the storm. But when she rose to draw the curtain, she saw it. A folded square of parchment, wedged between the sash and the stone sill, its edges already curling from the damp. Her heart performed an unfamiliar, unpleasant lurch. Margaret was not a woman given to melodrama. She checked the lock on the French doors, assured herself no one lurked in the garden below, and only then retrieved the letter. The seal was plain, a single drop of red wax, unmarked by any crest or initial. Inside, the script was tight, elegant, and utterly unfamiliar. She read it once, then again. My lady, your brother's new investment in the East India trading firm is not what it appears. The warehouses he has praised so publicly are empty. The dividends he has promised his backers are a fiction. By Michaelmas, the facade will crumble, and so will the Ellsworth name. I write this not as an enemy, but as one who cannot bear to see innocence consumed by another's ambition. Speak to no one of this letter. Burn it, but watch your brother closely. A friend. The candle guttered and died. In the sudden darkness, Margaret listened to the rain and felt the first cold tendril of genuine fear curl around her spine. She did not burn the letter. She folded it carefully, hid it beneath a loose board in the back of her wardrobe, and did not sleep a single wink. Over the following fortnight, Margaret did exactly as the letter had advised, not in obedience, but in grim necessity. She watched her brother, George Ellsworth, the current Earl of Ashworth, with new eyes. George was charming, reckless, and possessed of an optimism that bordered on the delusional. At 32, he had already run through half their father's fortune on horseflesh, card games, and a series of mistresses whose names were whispered behind silk fans. The East India venture, he had announced at a dinner party 3 months prior, would restore the family to its former glory. Now, Margaret noticed what she had previously dismissed, the way George's smile tightened when asked for specifics, the late-night meetings with men whose faces never appeared in the society columns, the ledger book he kept locked in his study, its pages guarded as though they contained state secrets. She was considering these things on a grey Tuesday morning when she received the second letter. This one arrived by post, slipped without ceremony among the invitations and bills. The same tight script, the same unadorned seal. My lady, a warning. Men have begun to ask questions about your brother's accounts. One of them wears a coat of deep green and carries a cane with a silver wolf's head. If he approaches you, say nothing. He is not what he pretends to be. The noose tightens. Keep your own counsel, and keep a candle burning by your window on Thursday nights. It may be that I will need to see a sign that you are safe. A friend. Margaret read this letter in the breakfast room, a cooling cup of chocolate before her. Her hands did not tremble. She had trained herself out of such displays years ago. but her pulse had become a wild, untrustworthy thing. Who was this mysterious correspondent? And why did he care whether she was safe? That afternoon she received an unexpected visitor. Lady Margaret. The butler's voice was carefully neutral. A Captain James Rowley, requesting a moment of your time. He carries a letter of introduction from Lord Winthrop. She had never heard the name. Yet when the man stepped into her drawing room, something in her chest gave a sharp, unfamiliar tug. Captain Rowley was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the plain dark coat of a man who valued function over fashion. His face was all sharp angles and quiet intensity. A soldier's face, she thought, with the shadows of things seen and regretted lurking behind his grey eyes. But it was his hands that held her attention. Strong, capable hands, the kind that could fire a pistol or pen a letter with equal precision. He bowed. Lady Margaret, thank you for receiving me unannounced. I know it is irregular. Captain. She gestured to a chair. Lord Winthrop's endorsement carries weight. How may I help you? He sat, but his posture remained that of a man ready to rise at any moment. I am conducting a quiet inquiry into certain financial irregularities within several prominent London families. Your brother's name has arisen. I had hoped you might offer some insight. Margaret's blood turned to ice water. She thought of the letters hidden in her wardrobe, of the warning about the man in green with the silver wolf's head cane. I'm afraid I know nothing of my brother's business affairs, she said, her voice remarkably steady. He is a private man in such matters. Captain Rowley's gaze did not waver. Is he, my lady? Or is he simply secretive? The question hung in the air like a blade. For a long moment, the only sounds were the hiss of the rain and the distant clatter of carriage wheels on the street below. Margaret chose her next words with care. Why should the government concern itself with a few shipping investments? Surely there are graver matters requiring your attention. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, or surprise, crossed the captain's face. You are perceptive, my lady. I shall be frank. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Your brother is not merely dabbling in questionable commerce. He is entangled with a network of men who trade in more than tea and silks. They trade in secrets, state secrets. And if what I suspect is true, the Ellsworth family is about to find itself at the centre of a scandal that will reach the very steps of Parliament. Margaret's carefully constructed composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. Why are you telling me this? She whispered. Because, Captain Rowley said, and his voice softened in a way that seemed almost involuntary. I believe you are an innocent in this, Lady Margaret, and I have seen too many innocents destroyed by the ambitions of those who claim to love them. He rose then, retrieving his hat from the side table. I will not trouble you further today, but if you recall anything, any detail, no matter how small, that might illuminate your brother's dealings, I beg you to send word to me at this address. He placed a small card on the table. I am staying at the Albion, in Covent Garden. At the door he paused. One more thing, my lady. Be careful whom you trust. There are those who would use you to reach your brother. Then he was gone, leaving Margaret alone with the rain, the card, and the terrible, thrilling certainty that her life had just split into two distinct halves, before the captain's visit and after. Chapter 2. The Midnight Meeting. Thursday night arrived with a low, clinging fog that turned the London streets into a labyrinth of ghosts. Margaret had spent the intervening days in a state of restless anxiety. She had not burned the letters. She had not revealed them to anyone, and despite every instinct for self-preservation, she had lit a single candle and placed it in her bedroom window, just as the second letter had instructed. Now she sat in the dark beside that flame, watching the garden below. At 11:30, a shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows near the garden wall. A man, moving with the silent economy of long practice, crossed the lawn and stopped directly beneath her window. Captain Rowley looked up. Even in the dim light, she could see the grim set of his jaw. He did not call out. Instead, he produced a small piece of folded paper from his coat, weighted it with a stone, and left it on the stone bench by the rose bushes. Then he melted back into the fog. Margaret waited until she was certain he had gone. Then she wrapped herself in a cloak, descended the back stairs, the servants were all asleep, and retrieved the note. My lady, you are brave to keep the light burning, braver than you know. I am the one who has been writing to you. I am Captain James Rowley, though my true purpose in London is not what I have claimed. I am attached to a small secret office within the Foreign Office, one charged with identifying and neutralizing threats to the Crown. Your brother has allied himself with a French agent who has been selling British shipping schedules to Napoleon's remaining loyalists. The man in the green coat is that agent. His name is Etienne Moreau, and he is dangerous. Your brother does not know Moreau's true allegiance. He believes he is merely funding a privateering venture, but ignorance will not protect him, or you, when the truth emerges. I have reason to believe Moreau knows that someone has been leaking information to me. If he discovers it is you, he will not hesitate to act. You must take care. Tell no one. Trust no one. Not even me, entirely. But if you are willing, meet me tomorrow at midnight, the old chapel on St. Mary's Lane, by the river. Come alone. And if you see anyone following you, do not come at all. Yours in caution, J.R. Margaret read the letter 3 times, committing every word to memory. Then she did as she had been instructed. She burned it in the hearth of her bedroom fireplace, watching the flames consume the evidence of her treachery. She was no longer merely an observer in her brother's downfall, she was a participant, and she was terrified. The chapel on St. Mary's Lane was a forgotten thing, its roof half collapsed, its pews long since sold for firewood, its altar stripped of gold and memory. Fog curled through the broken windows, like the breath of some ancient, sleeping creature. Margaret arrived at 5 minutes to midnight, dressed in a dark cloak and plain boots, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain the entire neighbourhood could hear. Captain Rowley was already there, standing before the ruined altar, his profile sharp against the ghostly glow of a single lantern. You came, he said. It was not a question. You did not give me much choice. She drew closer, her boots crunching on broken glass. If half of what you have written is true, my family is doomed regardless of whether I hide or help. At least this way, I might control the manner of our fall. He turned to face her fully. In the lantern light, his expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those grey, haunted eyes, held something that looked dangerously like admiration. You are remarkable, Lady Margaret, he said quietly. Most women in your position would have summoned the magistrate the moment they received the first letter. Most women in my position are not alone in the world. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and did not try to suppress it. My husband is dead. My brother is a fool. My friends are acquaintances who would abandon me at the first whiff of scandal. What do I have to lose by trusting you? Captain Rowley's jaw tightened. Your reputation, your freedom, perhaps your life. Then you had better make my trust worthwhile. He nodded, as though she had passed some test. Then he reached into his coat and withdrew a folded map, spreading it across the remains of the altar. Your brother has scheduled a large withdrawal from his accounts for Tuesday next, £20,000 in gold. He believes he is funding the purchase of 3 warehouses in Wapping. In truth, the money is destined for Moreau, who will use it to bribe a clerk in the Admiralty's shipping office. That clerk has access to the schedules of every Royal Navy vessel currently at sea. Margaret stared at the map, her mind racing. If Moreau obtains those schedules, he can sell them to the French. Our supply convoys will be ambushed. Hundreds of British sailors will die. Rowley's voice was flat, professional, but she saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. Stopping that payment is only half the battle. We must also expose Moreau and his network, and we must do so in a way that does not destroy your family in the process. Can it be done? Margaret asked. Can my brother be saved from the consequences of his own stupidity? Rowley hesitated. That hesitation told her more than any words could have. I will do everything in my power, he said finally. But Lady Margaret, your brother has broken the law. He has dealt with an enemy agent, even if unknowingly. At minimum, he faces ruin. At worst, the gallows, she finished. I am not naive, Captain. I know what treason costs. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fog pressed against the broken windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog howled. Then Rowley did something that surprised them both. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm, calloused, steady. I will not let you fall alone, he said. Whatever happens, I give you my word. Margaret looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. In that single, impossible moment, the careful walls she had built around her heart, walls of duty, of propriety, of the cold comfort of widowhood, began to crack. Captain Rowley, she whispered, what are we doing? He smiled then, a real smile tinged with sorrow. Something very foolish, I suspect, but necessary. He released her hand, but his gaze held hers. Tuesday night, there will be a masquerade at the home of Lord and Lady Pemberton. Your brother will be there, as will Moreau. I have arranged for you to receive an invitation. You will wear a silver mask and a gown of deep blue. I will find you. And then? And then, he said, picking up the lantern, we will end this. Chapter 3. The Masquerade of Knives. Tuesday night arrived with a bitter wind and a sky the colour of bruises. Margaret stood before her mirror, studying the woman who stared back. The silver mask covered her eyes and the bridge of her nose, transforming her into someone mysterious, someone dangerous, someone who was no longer content to sit quietly while her world crumbled. The gown of deep blue silk, midnight on water, she thought, whispered as she moved. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, her mother's jewels, worn as armour. She arrived at Pemberton House at 9:30, and the ballroom swallowed her whole. It was a dazzling spectacle. Hundreds of guests in silk and velvet, their faces hidden behind masks of every colour and design, dancing and laughing as though the world were not teetering on the edge of revelation. Margaret moved through the crowd with practised ease, her eyes searching. She found her brother first. George Ellsworth, masked in black and gold, was deep in conversation with a man in a coat of deep green. Even from across the room, she recognized the silver wolf's head cane. Etienne Moreau. Her pulse quickened, but her step did not falter. She circled the edge of the ballroom, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing servant, pretending to admire the frescoes on the ceiling. You look like a woman waiting for a ghost. She turned. Captain Rowley stood beside her, his own mask simple and black, his evening coat immaculate. He looked nothing like the shadowy figure from the ruined chapel. He looked like a gentleman, dangerous and desirable in equal measure. Perhaps I am, she murmured. Have you seen him? Moreau? I have. Rowley's gaze flicked toward the far corner of the room. He is meeting with your brother in the library in 15 minutes. I have arranged for a witness, a senior official from the Foreign Office, masked and hidden behind the curtains. If we can draw Moreau into admitting his true purpose, we will have him. And my brother? Rowley's expression softened. I have prepared a document for him. If he signs it, if he agrees to testify against Moreau and surrender the names of his other contacts, the Crown has agreed to show leniency. He will lose his fortune and his title, but not his life. Margaret closed her eyes for a single, treacherous second. Relief and grief tangled in her chest. "Thank you," she said. "I know you did not have to—" "Margaret." He said her name softly, intimately, the way no one had said it since her husband died. "I would move mountains for you. The question is whether you will let me." Before she could answer, a commotion erupted near the library door, shouting, the crash of a fallen candelabra, and then a voice she recognized with sickening clarity, her brother's voice, raised in panic. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know what he was." Rowley was moving before the second word left George's mouth. Margaret followed, her skirts bunched in her fists, her heart a frantic drum. The library was chaos. Moreau stood by the fireplace, a pistol in his hand, his green coat spattered with ink from a shattered bottle. George cowered behind a writing desk, his mask askew. And behind the curtains, a man in a plain grey suit was struggling to rise, a cut on his temple bleeding freely. "Stay back!" Moreau's accent was suddenly, unmistakably French. "All of you, stay back, or I swear I will shoot him." He gestured with the pistol toward George, who let out a high, terrified whimper. Margaret stepped forward. "Mr. Moreau." Her voice was calm, steady, the voice she used to quiet nervous horses and weeping widows. "You are surrounded. Whatever you hope to achieve by violence, you have already lost." Moreau's eyes, visible above his emerald mask, narrowed. "Lady Margaret, I should have known you were involved. The letters, the midnight meetings, you think I did not notice. You think I did not have you followed." Rowley moved to stand at her shoulder. "Put down the pistol, Moreau. The house is surrounded. There is no escape." "Perhaps not." The Frenchman's smile was thin and cold. "But I can still ensure that the Ellsworth name burns to ash. Your brother's confession, his cooperation, it will not save him from the scandal. And you, Lady Margaret, will be remembered as the woman who conspired with a spy to destroy her own family." "I would rather be remembered for that," Margaret said, her voice ringing clear, "than for standing silent while innocent men died." For a fraction of a second, Moreau's resolve wavered. It was enough. Rowley lunged. His shoulder caught Moreau in the chest, driving him backward into the fireplace. The pistol fired, a deafening roar, a puff of plaster from the ceiling, and then the Frenchman was on the ground, disarmed, pinned beneath the captain's weight. Footmen flooded the room. The man in grey, the Foreign Office official, now clutching a handkerchief to his wound, was shouting orders. George was crying. And Margaret stood in the middle of it all, trembling but whole, watching as Captain Rowley rose to his feet and crossed the room to her side. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, his hands gentle as they cupped her face, tilting it toward the light. "No." She was shaking so badly she could barely speak. "No, I am not hurt." "Good." He let out a long, shaky breath. "Because I cannot do this again. I cannot watch you walk into danger and simply stand by." "What are you saying, Captain?" He smiled, that same sorrowful, hopeful smile from the chapel. "I am saying, Lady Margaret, that I have spent my entire life bound by duty, to my country, to my king, to the mission. But tonight, for the first time, I find myself willing to break every rule for a woman." Behind them, Moreau was being dragged to his feet, his curses muffled by the hands of the footman. George was babbling apologies to anyone who would listen. The ballroom beyond had gone silent, the music stopped, the guests pressing forward to see the source of the commotion. Scandal was coming. Margaret could feel it, a wave about to crash. But in that moment, standing in the ruined library with Captain James Rowley's hands on her face and his eyes searching hers, she found that she did not care. "Then break them," she whispered. "Break them all. I am tired of being careful." Chapter 4. Sealed by Fate. The scandal, when it came, was as merciless as Margaret had feared. The newspapers ran with the story for weeks. Earls' treasonous alliance, Lady Margaret's midnight tryst with spy-catcher, The masquerade of shame. Her name was dragged through every gutter in London. Her friends abandoned her. Her brother, stripped of his title and fortune, fled to the continent, leaving Margaret to face the wreckage alone. But not entirely alone. Captain Rowley, James, as she had learned to call him in the quiet hours they stole together, stood by her side. He resigned his commission, surrendering the career that had defined him. He faced down the gossip with a quiet dignity that made the gossips feel small. And when the dust finally settled, when the scandal sheets moved on to fresher prey, he did the only thing that remained. He knelt before her in the very same drawing room where they had first met, and he asked her to be his wife. "I have nothing to offer you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "No title, no fortune, no reputation worth the name. Only myself, and a love that has no intention of letting you go." Margaret looked at him. This man who had written her midnight letters, who had risked everything to save her, who had seen her at her most terrified and had stayed anyway. "You have already given me everything," she said. "You gave me the truth when the world offered lies. You gave me courage when I had none left. And you gave me—" She paused, her hand rising to touch his cheek. "You gave me a reason to stop being careful." He kissed her then, gently, reverently, as though she were something precious and fragile, and infinitely worth protecting. They were married in a small chapel, not the ruined one by the river, but a proper one, with flowers and sunlight, and a handful of loyal friends in attendance. The Archbishop of Canterbury himself officiated, at the personal request of the Crown, in quiet recognition of the service Captain Rowley had rendered to his country. Lady Margaret Rowley wore a gown of pale gold, no diamonds, no mask, no armour. She walked down the aisle on the arm of no one. Her brother was gone, her father dead, and she met her husband at the altar with her eyes clear and her heart full. The newspapers called it a love story. The gossips called it a scandal. The Ellsworth family called it a tragedy. Margaret and James called it fate. That night, as they sat together in the quiet of their new home, a modest townhouse in Bloomsbury, far from the grandeur of Grosvenor Square, James produced a folded piece of parchment from his coat. "I have been keeping something for you," he said. "A letter I wrote the night I first saw your candle burning in the window. I never intended to send it. But now—" Margaret unfolded the paper. The handwriting was his, tight, elegant, achingly familiar. "My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, it means I have failed. It means the danger found me before I could find it. But I want you to know, you were never just a duty. You were never just a mission. From the moment I first saw you, poised, lonely, more brave than you knew, I was lost. You became the reason I fought, the reason I kept going when every path led to darkness. I love you. I loved you before I ever dared to speak it aloud, and if fate is kind, I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Yours, now and always, James." She looked up from the letter, her eyes bright with tears she did not try to hide. "You wrote this before you knew whether I would survive." "I wrote it," he said softly, "because I could not bear the thought of you never knowing the truth." Margaret set the letter down, very carefully, on the table beside her. Then she took her husband's face in her hands and kissed him with all the passion of a woman who had spent too long being careful. "I know the truth now," she whispered against his lips, "and I am never letting you go." Outside, the London rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder, washing the streets clean. But inside the little townhouse in Bloomsbury, there was only warmth and light, and the quiet certainty of two people who had found, at last, exactly what they had been searching for. Love written in secrecy, sealed by fate, and destined at last to see the sun. The end. My dear listener, I thank you most sincerely for keeping company with this tender tale of the heart. It is my fondest hope that this Regency romance has brought you a measure of comfort, delight, and quiet reflection, as our dear characters journeyed through sorrow, hope, devotion, and the promise of enduring love. If this clean historical romance has pleased you, I would be most grateful if you would offer a like,